Do you think it encourages legal crossings at the border by foreign nationals?
What I can tell you, Chairman Perry, is that we are facing a broken immigration system. And
I understand that. I'm going to tell you that it does encourage them to come.
I question you and other people's judgment who have taken that job.
20% decrease, 80%.
Across the nation.
80% increase. I don't like those
20%.
odds.
Has anyone been fired for the misuse of billions of taxpayers' dollars, to your awareness?
I wouldn't want to speak to the outcome of investigations because we do have so many investigations
You can
underway.
just say no. Then how do we learn? We keep doing the same thing. You people are spending billions and billions of American taxpayers' dollars fraudulently. And if I don't know who did it, we can't hold them accountable, and we're going to keep doing the same thing over and over again. This is why people hate Washington, D.C.
Mr. Berard? I'm sorry.
So I know it can sound confusing.
I'll begin by thanking our witnesses. The Honorable Deanne Criswell, the Administrator of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Ms. Kristen Bernard, the Deputy Inspector General for Audits for Office of the Inspector General at the Department of Homeland Security. It's a long. And Mr. Chris Currie, the Director of Homeland Security and Justice for the United States Government Accountability Office, for being here today. Can you tell us how much money has FEMA spent to address the illegal foreign national crisis on the border?
Chairman Perry, thank you for the question. You know, FEMA's role in supporting the border operations has been limited to the grant programs that Congress has directed us to administer. As I stated in my opening statement, it started with the ESFP humanitarian program and now has moved into the shelter and services program. That is the money that we have committed, is what has been appropriated.
So how much is that?
I can get you the numbers, and I'll have the staff get you the exact year over year. I know that's available on public record. I just don't have it right now.
I'm seeing the emergency food and shelter humanitarian is $900 million. Shelter and services programs, $425 million. The emergency food and shelter itself, I think, is $775 million or something like that. Would you say it encourages? I mean, maybe not by design, but some people believe it is by design. Do you think it encourages legal crossings at the border by foreign nationals?
What I can tell you, Chairman Perry, is that we are facing a broken immigration system. And
I understand that.
This program that Congress has directed us to administer is providing relief to those border agencies, border communities, nonprofit organizations, small communities, to help them with the costs that they are incurring.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is if you're on the other side of the border and you know that when you come to this side of the border, you're going to receive, at a minimum, shelter, food, transportation, acute medical care, personal hygiene supplies, and everything necessary to manage that. Does that encourage people to stay on the other side of the border where they have none of that, or does that encourage them to come to this side of the border where they get all that?
Yeah, Chairman Perry, I am not an immigration expert on what the causes of people coming across the border are, but we will continue to support Congress's direction to help support those communities that are experiencing costs.
All right, well, I'm going to tell you that it does encourage them to come.
Ms. Bernard, can you summarize the IG's findings and explain how the IG considers the hardships that disaster survivors are experiencing and the need for quick assistance when issuing recommendations to minimize waste, fraud, and abuse?
Certainly. Thank you for that question. I'd be happy to. The work that we've done on individual assistance has been primarily focused on FEMA's administration of the individual assistance programs in terms of its management and oversight. We have not done specific work to look at whether the administration was equitable or streamlined, but what we have found is FEMA should make improvements to be sure that applicants are eligible for the benefits that they're receiving and that costs are allowable.
Were the findings from your review incorporated into recent reports, including the 23 report on FEMA's COVID-19 funeral assistance program delivery?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Were the findings from the review incorporated into recent IG reports, including the 2023 report on FEMA's COVID-19 funeral assistance program delivery?
Yes, we did release, I believe you're asking if we released a report on FEMA's oversight of the funeral assistance program, and yes, we did issue findings.
And were the findings from the 2022 review that Homeland Security Appropriations Bill asked for, were the results from those findings incorporated into your review?
I would have to check to
Great, thanks.
make sure.
A job where all you do is deal with disasters is certainly a challenging one, and I question you and other people's judgment who have taken that job, but thanks for your service anyway. Can I get a commitment that you will please prioritize the work on actually American citizens and outstanding debts there? This has a profound impact on their ability to provide services, whether it's teaching our kids if they're operating in substandard facilities or broken or sharing facilities, as well as our hospital systems.
Congressman Graves, that is our priority. The priority of our agency is to assist these communities that have been impacted by the severe weather events as a result of climate change.
Administrator,
So we will continue to prioritize that work.
Administrator, I'd rather if you didn't say continue to, because I feel like that it hasn't been dealt with the urgency that it needs to be dealt with. And just going back to the comments that the chairman made, as I recall, the agency's been operating with about 65% of its staffing needs. And so if you're being pulled into directions that do not prioritize Americans, then that clearly deprioritizes or it jeopardizes how our own citizens are being treated. And so it does raise very significant concerns. Look, I'm going to say it over and over again. I think as a agency of the United States government, we need to prioritize United States citizens and their needs. If our hospital systems are waiting years for reimbursement, if our school systems are waiting years for reimbursement, I don't think I can go back to people at home and saying, yes, they're properly triaging the needs of our own citizens. I can't do that. And so I'd just rather if you didn't say you will continue to, I just want to ask you to please redouble efforts to address the needs of our own citizens.
I will go back with my team and see if there's anything we can do to expedite some of the projects that you have mentioned, but that is our priority.
What steps has been taken, if any, to fix these flaws and provide affordable flood insurance for all Americans?
Congressman Carter, I appreciate our continued conversation regarding the policyholders in Louisiana regarding Risk Rating 2.0. I think the most important fact that I will continue to talk about is that Risk Rating 2.0 now bases your flood insurance premium on your actual risk. And so while this does mean an increase for some homeowners, it also means a decrease. In fact, 20% of our policyholders have seen a decrease. However, as you and I have discussed, there is a certain group of individuals that are caught in this, I don't have an expensive home, but I live in this high-risk area and cannot afford the flood insurance. And we are committed to continuing to work with Congress on the affordability proposal that we have put forth as part of the NFIP reauthorization. We believe this is the best way for people to truly understand their risk, but also have the ability to purchase the insurance to protect their families.
20% decrease. 80%.
Across the nation.
80% increase. I don't like those
20%.
odds. I'm only talking about Louisiana. And I appreciate your mentioning a more broader SWAT. But for me and Congressman Graves and the Louisiana delegation, other members that represent areas throughout this country that's impacted, those aren't good odds for us. And so I appreciate that. We're going to keep hammering home the danger and the catastrophe that it's causing the people of Louisiana. After a storm, getting people back into their homes is one of your agency's most important priorities. Sometimes, but not always. FEMA can make repairs to somebody's house to get them back in quickly. However, this was often limited to prohibitions of making permanent repairs. How is this addressed in your new individual assistance program through its regulations?
So through the new interim final rule, we do have some expanded ability to do some repairs to homes, but the Disaster Survivor Fairness Act which Congress is moving forward on a bipartisan level, will actually give us greater capability to do direct repairs to homes as well as provide grants to states to help us along the way. I think the combination of both the Disaster Survivor Fairness Act as well as our interim final rule are going to really help individuals jumpstart their road to recovery in a more common sense approach for us to be able to use our funding more efficiently and more effectively.
And so the prohibition where a person can fix their home and make it even better, but they've been prohibited from doing so because it's deemed a permanent fix, is that something that's addressed in these regulation changes?
We have expanded slightly the ability to do some of those repairs within the regulation. It will be addressed more fully if the Disaster Survivor Fairness Act passes.
Ms. Criswell, you mentioned in your testimony that you had several of your FEMA folks working on the southern border, helping with the illegal immigrants, and you said that at one point you had 250, is that right?
Yes, sir. At our peak, we did not have more than 250 people engaged.
Okay, you didn't have more than 250. Okay, great. So what's their pay grade of those 250 people?
I would have to have my staff get back to you.
Let's have a look at that, please. So let's just say there are 13s. You got 250, that's $33.5 million. Did you calculate that into your costs of what you expended for the, I don't even know what program that would be? Is that out of the $715 million provided for humanitarian assistance? Did you count the salaries of these people?
The majority of the people that we have sent to support the southern border have been reimbursed to us through the Economy Act by the department.
Okay, so they're being paid by taxpayers' dollars.
Correct.
Okay. How many of these people were working on the southern border immediately following the fires in Maui?
Immediately following what, sir? I didn't hear you.
The wildfires in Maui, the most devastating wildfire in the history of the United States and the most horrendous tragedy that has ever happened to the state of
I would
Hawaii.
have to get back to you as to exactly how many were there at that particular time, but I can tell you that currently today we have less than 50 people out of our workforce of nearly 24,000
I got you,
that are
ma'am. My
engaged
point
in
is
the
this:
border.
if there is one single member of FEMA working on the border processing illegal aliens coming into the country when our Hawaiian brothers and sisters are without homes, that's one too many. And I think that you've lost your way. Are you familiar with the term mission creep?
I am.
Okay. Although, as you know, FEMA is not an immigration or law enforcement agency, however, FEMA has recognized expertise in executing grant programs, so you're good at giving away taxpayers' dollars.
The expertise that we have, sir, is to bring collaboration and
Ma'am, this is your
coordination.
testimony. You are recognized experts in executing grant programs. Okay, so you're good at giving away other people's money. And I believe that if I read this stuff and I see how your agency's been working in particular with the southern border, you're confusing motion with progress. Ms. Bernard, I'm looking at this stuff and I see there's billions and billions of dollars that was fraudulently expended, right? And you say repeatedly, FEMA has interpreted these things, FEMA made these decisions, FEMA decided to do these additional duties. FEMA is not a person. FEMA is an agency. Do you have the names of the individual people that made these, I think, very poor decisions to expend billions of taxpayers' dollars fraudulently? Do you have anybody's names attached to these expenditures?
So if I'm understanding your question, you're asking if we have the names of the fraudsters? We do have a very robust COVID fraud unit that's conducting over
I see
500
that.
investigations.
Yeah, I mean the names of the people at FEMA that made these incredibly poor decisions. Because FEMA that's an agency, it's not a person. An agency is made up of people that make bad decisions. Do you have their names?
We do not have their names, no, but we have generally across the board made several recommendations for FEMA to improve its ability to get money into the right hands and keep money from the wrong hands.
Okay, so you make recommendations to an agency, not individual people, so the individual person is not, they don't even know if they made a good decision or bad? Is that right?
That's correct in this context, yes.
Okay. Has anyone been fired for the misuse of billions of taxpayers' dollars to your awareness?
I wouldn't want to speak to the outcome of investigations because we do have so many investigations
You can
underway.
just say no. To the best of your knowledge, has anyone been fired for misusing billions of taxpayers' dollars?
I wouldn't want to speculate, no.
I'm going to take that as a no. Has anyone been disciplined?
Again, I would point to our investigative work.
Has
which-
anyone been retrained? Okay, hold on a sec. Ms. Criswell, has anyone been fired, disciplined, or retrained for the misuse of billions of taxpayers' dollars from your agency?
Congressman, as it relates to the findings in the OIG reports, and those especially that we have disagreed with, no.
Okay, all right. Then how do we learn? We keep doing the same thing. You people are spending billions and billions of American taxpayers' dollars fraudulently. And if I don't know who did it, we can't hold them accountable, and we're going to keep doing the same thing over and over again. This is why people hate Washington, D.C. You people are giving billions of dollars that you throw willy-nilly around because you can, Mr. Currie, and you keep doing it over and over again, and we don't learn. That's why people hate bureaucracies. Ms. Bernard, you need to be empowered. You need to be empowered to recognize individuals, not an agency. And you need to be empowered to recommend them being fired and held financially accountable and put into prison for fraud. Ms. Criswell, you are the leader. You are the captain of this ship. And if you're not cleaning house right now, you are not doing your job, ma'am, because you've been put, you're responsible for billions of taxpayers' dollars and thousands of people's jobs and tens of thousands of Americans' well-being in tragedy. And if you have leakers on your team, it's not going to work out. Sorry for
Chair,
exceeding my
thanks, the
time.
gentleman.
I yield back.
Administrator Criswell, if and when Congress does appropriate additional funding for SSP, does FEMA have a plan to adjust the allocation formula to better prioritize border communities?
Congressman, we recognize the incredible amount of value that the SSP program has brought to our border communities. And in the first iteration of that, because of the limitation on time, we did determine to do a direct allocation based on some previous requests. If appropriated by Congress, our plan is to go forward with a competitive program so we can take in current data and current needs within different communities to help determine the appropriate amount to go to each of the different jurisdictions.
Okay, I appreciate you saying that, although I think Arizona has dealt with the disproportionate burden and should be in front of the line, if you will, for the next round of funding when Congress does pass additional SSP support.
I share the concerns that have already been expressed about mission creep and focus on non-Stafford Act disasters. And in the meantime, I'm hearing from constituents in Utah that they have concerns with FEMA that are clearly within FEMA's authority and FEMA's mission. We have floodplain maps that aren't being updated, and locals who are reaching out to FEMA about updating floodplain maps, and they're having a hard time getting answers. People aren't being responsive. Is this something you can help us with? Will your staff work with us on making sure we can get responses?
Congressman, I am not familiar with the specific flood maps, but I will certainly take that back personally and talk to my team about the status and what we can do to help them.
How did FEMA and GSA determine that the renovation of the regional office building to house FEMA's headquarters is the most effective option?
Congresswoman Norton, as you know, our lease is coming up in 2027, and we have been working closely with the department as well as GSA to identify the most suitable building for us to move into. I believe that the building at 7 and D is going to make the most cost-effective use of federal funding by using an existing federal facility. It also provides improved security features to support our staff and our interagency that come together when we activate our National Response Coordination Center. It's also co-located with one of our DHS partners, and so we'll continue to work with the department and GSA as they move forward with this move.
This becomes more challenging when FEMA employees are forced to work on non-disaster emergencies such as the border crisis. What is FEMA doing to ensure the agency's mission is not causing further project delays, especially as the agencies work to address staffing issues?
FEMA has been continuously called on for the last several decades in supporting some of the non-Stafford Act events. As far as 2014, and again in 2019, and we are still being called on to support some of the non-Stafford events because of our ability to provide technical assistance and technical expertise in establishing a coordination and a collaboration function. That is the expertise and the skill set that our emergency managers across the nation bring to the table. That's what FEMA brings to our federal partners to help them with some of these challenging issues that we are facing today.
Mr. Berard? I'm sorry. And Mr. Currie, can you speak about this a little bit?
I can take that, sir. In our work over the years, we've been to every state and territory in the country, and a consistent theme is complexity of FEMA grant programs. You mentioned it. I know you probably still have open projects in the Mississippi Gulf Coast and Gulfport and Long Beach, and it's a consistent theme, and I think while there have been some steps taken to reduce some complexity in some of the steps, I think, an overhaul of the system needs to happen in order to sort of re-look at how we apply public assistance projects. I mean, the way it is now is that you do a damage assessment, and then for years and years later, you're basically going back and forth between the federal government and the state and the locality for small changes. That's going to have to change. The structure of that's going to have to change if this is ever going to get more efficient. And so I think that's what needs to be focused on.
Does it seem to you to be a good idea to have this board then decide where the money's going and who's getting it, knowing that in many cases they're picking their own affiliate organizations in the member states and cities and political subdivisions? Does that at all seem incestuous to you from a relationship of spending money and the fact that the organizations, the members of that board, exclusively decide where that money's being spent?
Yeah, the legacy or the initial emergency food and shelter program that we have is one that, again, we adapted to meet the needs of the direction back in 2019. It was an ill-suited program to meet the needs and the scale of the support that we were providing under the humanitarian side of that program. That's why we were grateful for Congress to direct the SSP program, as the board no longer has a role in making these decisions.
I understand, but this program still exists.
It does not exist.
It does not exist.
It has been sunsetted and it is now being replaced by the SSP program. We are still closing out.
How much money is left in the program?
I would have to get back with you with the specifics. Self-certification is just one of many steps that we use to make determinations on whether to issue that money.
So you are going to use self-certification.
It will be one of the steps that we will use, yes.
Well, if you're self-certifying, what other steps would you use that would negate self-certification?
We also use identity verification and a number of other things that we'd be happy to provide a full briefing on.
So I just want to make sure I understand. So FEMA is saying we're going to make sure that you are who you say you are. That's identification, but still allow you to self-certify in the face of what you just rightly criticized as the previous administration's fraud based on self-certification, but you're still going to use it in this instance, even though essentially what you're saying, we're just going to make sure you are who you say you are.
Chairman Perry, we believe that the processes that we are using are sufficient to make sure that we are determining that we are giving money appropriately. We put fraud controls in place, and I would be happy to have a separate session with you, not on public camera, about our fraud controls that we have in place.
All right, well, I will tell you, and my time is way overdue for this round, but the self-certification process is very concerning to me, and the fact that we just identify the individual, that might be great after the fact to try and go collect that money that's fraudulently taken from the American people, but I think the self-certification process, even by your own admission, not that you handled it, that was another administration, is a problem, and I'm concerned that you would consider that as some kind of reasonable methodology to disperse money prior to, as a matter of fact, in advance, in any case.
Ms. Currie, what policy changes should FEMA and Congress prioritize, though, to ensure mitigation dollars, getting back to the mitigation side of things, are dispersed fairly and to reduce demand for post-disaster FEMA resources?
Oh, I'm glad you made that comparison, because I think mitigation is one of the only options we have to reduce the post-disaster costs, because we're going to continue to have disasters, and the federal government's going to continue to pay for them. I think, you know, some of the things that are being done right now are helpful through like the BRIC program. So, you know, over the years, we've talked about how little funding actually came in on the pre-disaster side versus the post-disaster side. Now with BRIC, you have a lot more available funding. However, you know, when you spread it across the country and all the territories, it's still hard. It's not that much money per state. So I think, you know, being able to allocate that to the most effective and most impactful resilience projects is key. And I think these should be the ones that we see the most damage and the most cost on the back end. So for example, you know, in every disaster, the electric grid, wastewater treatment facilities, public buildings, those are the big costs. Those are probably 90% of federal FEMA disaster costs. The extent to which we can mitigate the huge, expensive pieces of infrastructure, we're going to save money on the back end.
Understand the emergency food and shelter humanitarian program is being moved, or the functions of that, over to the shelter and services program under the grant format for driving those resources out. But the original legacy emergency food and shelter program, which has a board, will remain. Is that my understanding, or am I missing something?
So I know it can sound confusing. There was an existing program, emergency food and shelter program, that supported communities across the U.S. with some of their homeless
Right.
populations. That program will continue.
Okay.
The adaption to that program for ESFP humanitarian has sunsetted,
And
and
it's
it has
moving
been
up.
replaced with the shelter and services
So
program.
just for further clarification, for the legacy program that exists and has a board, is there anything to preclude those funds that will come or that remain in that program from anything that will preclude that money to be spent on people existing and residing in the United States who are illegal foreign nationals?
So we have eligible expenses within that program, and we reimburse jurisdictions, organizations for the list of eligible expenses that have been identified. I'd be happy to get you a list of what those eligible expenses
So
are.
if you know, and if you don't know, it's okay to say so, but that list, would it include, because these are homeless people in America, living in some city or some town in America, does it preclude money from being spent on people residing illegally that are illegal foreign nationals in this country who are also homeless?
So you're talking about, I just want to make sure I'm clear, you're talking about the original program? not
Yes,
the-
that has the board.
I do not know that specifically. I'd have to get back to you on
All
that.
right, I'd appreciate it if you would. This committee stands adjourned.